Good afternoon, good evening. We're so excited that we've got a big crowd joining us for our special event today. It looks like we still have a lot of people joining, so I will just welcome you for a minute while we let a few more people log in. My name is Claire Keys. I'm the Director of Communications and Content for Building Brave. And if you're not familiar with Building Brave, if you got the link through your organization or through a friend, we really welcome you to join our community of professional women who are aspiring to connect and grow. You can join us at any time through community.buildingbrave.org. And we would welcome you. We have a lot of special conversations that lift each other up, challenge us, and help us to lean into challenges and obstacles and find our path. So I welcome you. We've still got people adding in here. So we'll give people just another minute to join. If you would like just to warm up your fingers at the keyboard, why don't you tell us where you are calling in from today? We'd love to know. And again, we'll get started in just a moment. And it looks like we have people from all over the place. It's going so fast. From Wisconsin, California, throughout the US. I saw someone in the UK. I'm sorry I didn't see where because it went by so quickly. But we are so happy to have you here. And I know your time is precious, so I would love to get us kicked off this morning. It is my absolute privilege to be able to bring to you Sally Helgesen today. I may or may not have told my mom that this is like an Oprah day for me. I am so excited to have you here, Sally. Sally has been named the world's premier expert on women's leadership. She has an abundance of consulting experience, and probably one of her most recent recognitions is co-authoring the book, How Women Rise. And we'll be touching on some of the behaviors from the book that hold a lot of women back. But Sally, I'd love to just let you say hello to our beautiful audience today and share a little bit more about yourself.
Hello, beautiful audience. It is wonderful to be here with you today and have this opportunity to talk about some of the habits and behaviors that are most likely to get in the way of successful women and hold them back from achieving their full potential. How Women Rise, the behaviors we'll be talking about today come from the book How Women Rise. And I wrote How Women Rise because I've been doing workshops and leadership programs for women all around the world now for the last 31 years. And I began to see consistent habits and behaviors, consistent patterns in internal barriers that hold women back. And I'm a big believer in addressing internal barriers first because they lie within our control. So it's great to have the opportunity to really talk this through with you today, because I think I've been hearing since the book was published 3 years ago that there's tremendous value for women at every level.
That's so true. It doesn't matter if we're green in our careers or very seasoned. We all have things that we can work on and address. And also, as part of Building Brave, I'd like to say there are also things we can do to help each other as women to hone our skills and notice behaviors that we might not even recognize that we're doing. So to start out, I'll say another really quick welcome. We've still got people joining us. Again, I'm Claire Keys from Building Brave, and I'm interviewing Sally Helgesen, author of How Women Rise, and an expert known across the world for her in-depth knowledge of women's leadership. And today, as I interview you, I really wanted to start with, I think, an important reminder that came through when I was reading the book. And that is, while there are a lot of things that can hold us back, and that might look a little different for each of us, it's important not to be too hard on ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think there were some great examples in the book of how many women, I don't want to stereotype because it's not universal, but many of us are very self-critical. And could you just speak to that and the intention of having an open mind as we go through this conversation?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. My co-author on this book was Marshall Goldsmith, who's been one of the founders and pioneers of executive coaching. And Marshall said something that really influenced me and made me determined that we would collaborate on this book. He said that at this point, it was 35 years when we started our journey of working with women, 35 years. And he works with people at the top. So this was CEOs, heads of global nonprofits, generals in the military, senior diplomats. He said that in all that time, he has never worked with a woman where he didn't at some point have to say, don't be too hard on yourself. And as he said, it's very rare to have to say that to his male clients. So it's one of the things that we do. It's part of what makes us wonderful. We really try, we aspire, we want to get better. 90% of all the self-improvement books in the world are bought by women. We want to get better. We want to make improvements. It's a positive thing. The downside of it can be that we sometimes expect too much from ourselves in terms of perfection. That's why one of the habits in the book is the perfection trap. And we expect to make progress very quickly. Funny story, I'll tell you. In the emphasis in the book is on habits and behaviors that get in women's ways as they seek to move to the next level. So some of these and many of these habits and behaviors are those that can serve you well early in your career or at the middle part of your career, but can trip you up as you try to move to a position with more influence, authority, and scope. But it doesn't mean that they're bad behaviors. Well, early in after the book came out, about 8 months afterwards, I was doing a series of programs for women in Japan, where surprisingly, How Women Rise was a big bestseller. And in the workshops I was doing, the women kept saying, I have this bad behavior, I have that bad behavior. So I was saying, these are not bad behaviors. These are behaviors that can get in your way. And guess what? I heard one of the women said, Sally, do you know what your book is called in Japanese? It's called Women's Bad Behaviors.
Oh, no.
I thought, no wonder it's a bestseller. We're often very avid to find out what's wrong with us. So we that's a good thing, but we need also a more positive focus and to learn to forgive ourselves for not being perfect.
There's a really important reminder. And the other thing I wanted to ground our audience with this morning is that your definition of rising might look different than mine and my neighbors, my sisters, my network of coworkers, and we each get to define that for ourselves. Can you elaborate on that briefly?
Certainly. There are a lot of women that I've worked with over the years who've said, I don't want the senior position. I want a job that's deeply satisfying to me, that gives me the opportunity to use and develop my skills and my potential. And it also gives me the potential for having a rich, full life where I can enjoy every aspect of my life. So that's why I really wanted to make the point for women. It's important. The idea of rising means rising to your full potential, rising to a point where you have a deeply satisfying, rewarding, and sustainable experience in the workplace and in your personal life as well. This is something big. This is a big aspiration, but it's not just about getting that senior position, which is often how rising has been defined in more traditional hierarchical organizations.
So true. And that might change in different seasons of life and different chapters. You never know. Life tends to not be a straight line, that's for sure. So I know today we were both really excited about talking about what happens when we're being insufficiently intentional. In other words, we aren't taking the reins for what we have the power to control. And there are a few habits we're going to talk about today. And I think if you're at all like me, you might find yourself nodding and saying, oh, I do that, or I've done that. And ooh, yeah, in hindsight, I totally could have done it or said that differently. But let's dive right in, Sally. You know, you told me that some of these behaviors pair really nicely. And so let's look at 1 and 2. I'll tell the audience what these are and then we can unpack them. But the first one is the reluctance to claim your accomplishments. Guilty. Number 2, expecting others to spontaneously notice and reward your contributions. And I'll let you jump in and give a little more context to both of these.
Yeah, well, you can see how well these pair, that when we're reluctant to claim our achievements or our accomplishments, when we're reluctant because maybe we've had pushback in the past, when I talk to women who say they're reluctant to claim their achievements, they often say, you know, I don't want to be perceived of as arrogant. I don't want to be perceived of as all about me. I don't want to take credit away from my team to talk about my experience, to my accomplishments, or I don't want to be like that jerk down the hall who's constantly talking about how great he is. I hear that one as well. So those are things that we really, they kind of hold us back from doing the work of finding a graceful and clear way to talk about what we contribute. That's a very, very important thing for us to do, because we will not be able to gain the visibility and ultimately the connections that we need in order to reach our full potential when we don't find a way to do that. And I've got lots of ways to help people to do that. So that when we're reluctant, then we come up with a strategy for dealing with that. And the strategy we come up with is expecting others to notice. I've heard this for 30 years, women saying, well, I believe that if I do a great job, people should notice. Or I believe if I do a wonderful job, people will notice.
Yep.
And if we lived in a perfect world, they would notice, but we don't. And they're often busy or distracted, and it's just not going to happen. So we need to find a way to comfortably and consistently represent what our achievements are if we want to move forward.
Yeah. You know, actually, we had one question already come in on this. Someone, Abby McNear, asked, I have read that women are expected to share credit widely, or they are viewed in a more negative light than men who do the same. Is that true?
You know, research demonstrates that it is. Research demonstrates that women who talk about their own achievement, that at first the reaction is, well, I didn't expect that she'd be, you know, so much all about her. So rather than sharing with the team, there are 2 things that are important here. Number 1, talking about your achievements and talking about what your team has done that's not an either or. Those are not 2 different things. They don't need to be. You can always talk about, well, our team was able to achieve this. Here are some of the results and here are some of the outcomes. We're really happy about this. My contribution to the team was X. So you stop making it an either or. That's a very, very helpful way to think about it. But the other thing is kind of a bigger point. Yes, why does it happen that women are often viewed a little more negatively if they talk about their achievements? It's often because people aren't used to it, and they haven't heard it, and they don't. It feels a little bit abrupt to them. Mm-hmm. And my advice is, let them get used to it. Don't proactively decide you don't have the option to talk about your achievements, finding a graceful way to do it that also acknowledges others. Don't decide that proactively that you can't do that because you want to control what other people think. What other people think lies outside your circle of concern. What you do, how well and gracefully you learn to articulate your contributions, that's something that you can control.
That's really powerful. I think we, as women, can get tied up in that dialogue of what people are saying or doing, or what we think they're saying or doing, and we can't control all that noise, and it's not our job to.
Not our job. And I've often heard that. I've noticed,
or remote in person.
I've often heard situations come up, where I've been in a meeting with a lot of senior men, and somebody also say, I'm not sure so-and-so was so happy with the way you phrased that. It's like, you expect me to care? Is sort of the response. Whereas even with a very senior woman, I'm not so sure. So, let's see, maybe I phrased that too harshly, so we immediately go to, how did I do it wrong? And that's a good thing. It's a good thing to be self-reflective and think, what can I learn from this? Can I be more effective? But not to hold ourselves back and say, I don't have the option to talk about what I contributed because I need to please everybody, or I need to make sure everybody thinks I'm this wonderful empathic person who's totally team oriented and not really in it for myself at all.
Right. So what are some really easy action items that women can take, whether it's inventorying what they're currently doing or finding a peer to help them watch for some of this reluctance to claim accomplishments, or even expecting others to jump in and notice? How can we get started?
Well, I think what we want to do is we want to recognize that if this is not a habit, if this is not a behavior that we have practiced before, we are going to be a little new at it, and we're not going to be extremely skilled at it. So we want to begin to practice it in very small ways so that we can become comfortable. So we want to look for opportunities to take very small risks, if we haven't done this, where we are talking about what we did. One of the things that's very helpful to do is to frame in our mind what we are doing, what we have done, what we have contributed as information that could be helpful for someone else to know. In particular, our boss to know, or our team leaders to know. It can be helpful for them to know that we have made a contribution, because then they will have a better understanding of what our skills and our potential is, and they'll have a better idea of how to use us in a way that can serve the ends of the team or their unit. So if we think of it as information, we can get a little bit less self-conscious. Again, the framing in terms of, this is what the team did, this is what I contributed, that's a very, very helpful thing to do. It's also really helpful if we're at the beginning of that process, and if this is something we've been shy about, is enlisting other people to help us. And you can do that virtually, as if you're still in a virtual mode, you can do that as easily as you can do it in a meeting. Say you feel that you have not represented your achievements very well in a certain meeting, you can say to one or two people who have your back, to some that have your back, say, I've recognized that I'm not great about being clear about my contributions. So in this meeting, I'm going to give it a shot. And I've got some way of framing it, using the language of contributions rather than achievement. I find to be a very, very powerful tool. I'm going to give it a shot. Could you just watch and afterwards give me any thoughts about how I could be more effective going forward? So you're not asking for feedback, tell me what I did wrong. You're asking for the feed forward, as my colleague Marshall calls it. How might I be more effective going forward? And that's a very good thing to do, because then you know that you have got, someone's got your back. You've got someone in the room and you're getting real information. You have the sense of having an ally in the room, so you have that support. It's a very helpful way to practice any habit or behavior that's new.
When you do something like this, do you recommend asking for help with someone above you at your level? Does it matter? Just start asking.
Yeah, I think it almost doesn't matter. You might be more comfortable asking someone at your own level, a peer, a colleague with whom you have a good relationship. I think that's probably a lower risk ask than to ask a boss. The one thing I would do is I would avoid asking anybody who's highly critical, because that may end up feeding your rumination,
True.
your perfectionism, you're feeling like you're going to get criticism from this person.
Right.
The other thing I recommend is persisting. And this is a very interesting question, because often I work with a lot of women and have for many, many years. And one thing I observe, and I've observed this in myself over my very long career, is that we can have a tendency to back off if we don't immediately get a good response and feel like, ooh, I kind of blew it here.
Yeah.
And I want to share a story about why it's good to persist. This happened to me probably about 35 years ago. I was working in corporate communications before I got involved in leadership. And I was in a meeting. I was the only woman, and I was the most junior person there. And a subject came up, and I had what I thought was a really good idea about it. So I gathered all my nerve and I said what I was thinking. Didn't get any response. Just like it landed, nobody heard. As I was walking out of the meeting, my boss's boss came up behind me, and he said in a very scathing, sarcastic voice, "Well, you certainly don't have any reluctance to talk, to share your opinion."
Yikes.
And I don't know what got into me. To this day, I don't know what got into me. But all I said was, no, I don't. I didn't say I have a perfect right to share, I wasn't offended.
Sure.
And I didn't do what I would usually do, oh, did I offend your highness? Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I speak out of turn? I won't do that again. I didn't, instantly back off. Somehow the words came out of my mouth, no, I'm not, which was information. Get it? I mean, I wasn't thinking of it that way, but it was information that I'm not really someone who's that frightened of sharing an opinion.
Mhm.
And he walked away, and I thought, okay, I'm dead here. I've really alienated my boss's boss. But a month later, nothing happened. And a month later, I was in the room, and that man was in an adjoining room. And I heard him say to someone, what I like about Sally is she's not afraid to say what she thinks. And I thought, he got used to it.
Yeah.
He got used to it. And when we try to manage perceptions, when we overly try to manage perceptions, we don't give people a chance to get used to it. And I think especially for women, if we're dealing with men who aren't used to women speaking up or talking about what they've done, that we need to give them the opportunity to get used to it by not backing off or getting defensive.
Yeah. That's an art to do it gracefully, but you did. You held your head high and kept going.
I don't know why. It was amazing.
Simple yet confident came in through the chat. I love that. So when we are doing the dance between the reluctance and expecting others to notice us, it reminds me again of your either or analogy, right? And again, we don't have to do either or, we can do an and or something different.
That's exactly right. And it isn't, we're reluctant, so we expect others. There are so many problems with expecting others to spontaneously notice and value our contributions. But really the chief one is this, it's often, unless we have an unusually sensitive leaders who actually see us frequently, which is for most of us not the case, it's not going to happen. People notice what their attention is brought to. And if we let that expectation get in our way, what I see happen is that you can come to feel under-recognized because you're not being recognized because you're not claiming that contribution. You can feel undervalued, and over time, you will disengage. You will disengage if you feel consistently undervalued.
Yeah.
And that is a higher risk, actually, than speaking about your contributions. You don't want to put yourself in that position. I have done thousands of interviews with women who have left jobs that really look good on paper. And the most common thing I hear from them is they never understood what I could do. They had no sense of what I could contribute. You don't want to connive with the people you work with to be under-recognized so that they don't have a sense of what you can do or what you want to do. You want to talk about it. You want to find a way of getting comfortable with that.
Right. We had a question come in here, Sally. I feel I am capable of a senior position. How to talk with higher level managers about promotion? How do I do that?
Yeah. First of all, I would identify a couple of people that you want to talk with. And I would begin the conversation by being clear about what you aspire to do, and but frame it in an ask to some degree. You know, I'm very interested in the possibility of moving into that position or position like that. I think that there are a few reasons I could be very good at that, and then list what they are. And then ask them, what kind of skills would I need to develop in order to move to something like that? And what kind of connections would be helpful in moving to that position? So what you're doing is, on one hand, you're getting information for yourself about what kind of, there may be skills that are involved that you don't know about. So now you know what those are, and you know to work on them. You are also showing that you are politically astute and realistic in understanding that who you know is as important in terms of moving into a senior position, and the connections you have and the visibility you have, as the skills you have. So you want both of those questions. If you only ask about the skills, then you're not acknowledging the full reality of what's involved, and you can risk sounding naive, or you can risk tremendous disappointment, because you can acquire some of those skills, but still, because you don't have the internal or external connections that would be helpful to you, not get into that position. So that's how I would start to do it. But don't be reluctant. You know, sometimes there's a kind of a loyalty trap that women feel sometimes, that if I talk about the next job I want to have, my boss will think I'm disloyal or believe I'm, disengaged. Put it, I love this job. This job is terrific. It's helped me recognize what I want to aspire to. And this is what I want to aspire to. But you want to talk about it. It's very important not to just get clear on where you intend to go, but to talk about that. And, that's something that men do all the time. I want to be a partner by the time I'm 28 years old, whatever. And sometimes, senior leaders will say, well, I didn't know she wanted a job like that. She never talked about it. She never told me. She wasn't clear about it. So you want to talk about it.
Yeah. I think that's a natural transition. If we look at the next two habits we wanted to package together here, One is putting your job before your career, and that's exactly what we're talking about here.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Feeling that if you pour all your energy into the job you have, number one, that's going to be sufficient to position you for the next job. And number two, that's really kind of all you have to do. Okay, I'm going to get as good at this job as I possibly can. And that can really keep you stuck, because if you devote all your energy to the job you have without any thought strategically about where you want that job to lead, then you risk proving to everybody that basically you are perfect for the job you have
Right.
because you're so good at it. And I have worked with many women who've said, you know, my boss told me they can't afford to move me up because I do this job so well. And I feel good about that, but what does that mean for my career? So you don't want to spend all your energy saying, this is the perfect job for me. You want to say, I want to do a great job at this job. Here's what I'm thinking that I would like this job to lead to. So you always want part of your mind engaged with what is the strategy also in this job, in terms of what I learn, in terms of who I get to know, in terms of the visibility that I cultivate, you know, where might this lead?
Right. That networking is so important along the way. So people hear your intentions. And I believe in the book you talked about the importance of having your elevator pitch ready to spit out on a moment's notice. Do you have one that you could share with us?
Oh, certainly. You know, I have my I call it an intention statement more than an elevator pitch, but it's really an articulation of what it is you are trying to contribute to the world. So for me, mine is my mission is to help women leaders and aspiring women leaders to recognize, articulate, and act on their greatest strengths, and to help organizations develop cultures in which talented women can thrive. That's my mission statement. It's my intention statement. It's been that for about 30 years. So different people, you know, I remember working out in Indiana with a woman who was a compliance officer at a large university. And we talked about it, and she said, you know, my intention is really to help my organization understand that compliance. Think about compliance first so that we can create a culture of doing the right thing. I just love that intention statement. So I'm a big believer that having an intention statement for what you want to achieve in your job or your career, what you want to contribute, is a very powerful starting place. And when I do workshops, it's one of the exercises we do. And I coach people on developing more concise and clear intention statements. And often my LinkedIn inbox is filled with people, Sally, how's this as an intention statement? I get a lot of them, but I believe it's a really, really important thing to do, because then, and it doesn't mean we can't adjust it. We might have one statement and then it changes over time, but we want to be clear in our own mind, and we want to be able to be clear to other people about what we're trying to engage, because that's how they'll know to support us. They'll look and say, well, that's a positive mission. I can get on board with that. So it really helps us. It also helps us make decisions about what to pursue and what to let go of. If we have a very clear intention in a job, some opportunity may come along and we can judge, how does this further what I'm really trying to do? Or is this a detour that's really not going to do that?
Yeah, I think you mentioned that it was a yardstick of sorts that you can use to really be thoughtful. The next habit we wanted to talk about is the disease to please. And for many of us, that means saying, yes, sure, I'll do that. I'll help. It'll make me look good. Oh, that important person asked, so I better say yes to that one. But if it's not aligned with our goals, if it's not aligned with our purpose, our intention, our passion, there are times we have to be protective and say, no, not now. I can help you find someone else. Thanks for thinking of me. But the disease to please can really set us back or off track, overextend us.
Oh, certainly it can, because we're not people, when we have the disease to please, we are not very good at identifying and then protecting our own boundaries. So it's very easy to kind of almost get eaten alive or to get off the track. I'm in the book, this one, and this was an incredible moment. This woman had, she was in a law firm, and one of her colleagues, not a boss, not anybody senior to her, but a male colleague, had suggested to her that she might have a benefit by working on some initiative in the firm. He said, I think you could get more well-known. I think, it might be a good thing for you. And so she said, yes. She thought, oh, this is an opportunity to, make this guy think I'm great, etc. So she got involved in it, and she found that it was quite the opposite, that it was taking her away from what her job was and what she should be focused on. But she kept doing it because she didn't want to disappoint him. She didn't want to disappoint him. She felt flattered that he wouldn't have made this suggestion, etc. But finally, her boss said, you know what, this is not working. You're going to have to let that go.
Right.
So she finally approached the guy who'd suggested her and said that she was going to have to let it go. And he said, oh, okay. And she said, I'm curious, why did you think that it would be the right thing for me? And he said, well, basically, you just seem like the kind of person who would say yes, and I didn't have time to do it. So we put ourselves in situations where we're trying to please people, often who, are not even necessarily thinking of our best interest at all. And she realized she'd stuck with this at a cost to herself. Definitely. Because she was trying to please somebody who was completely not invested in her career.
Right. Well, I don't even know how I would react if someone had that statement. Oh, I just knew you'd say yes.
Yeah, it's a good wake-up call. It's a good wake-up call. Rather than feeling horrible, it's a really good thing. Oh my goodness, my disease to please got in my way. Claire, this is really important because the disease to please is a classic behavior that can serve us well early and midpoint in our career, because we're a wonderful person. People like to work with us. We say yes, we show up, we do what we say we're going to do. So it's a positive trait. This is not the bad behavior that the Japanese editors decided it was, but it is a behavior that if we do not address it, when we get into a more senior position, this will really undermine us because we will have a tough time delegating, because we'll be trying to protect other people, and we'll be concerned about not pleasing them because we dumped some work in their lap. So that will be difficult. We'll have a tough time setting boundaries when we're getting far, far more requests about things that we could or should be doing. We'll have trouble sorting through opportunities because more opportunities will come our way. Right. And this is important too. This is very important. Pleasing is one of the two habits that if you have it in the workplace, you probably have it at home too. You're probably going that extra mile at every opportunity to please your children, your spouse, whoever is in your family. And operating on two tracks where you are trying to please everyone is not a recipe for success. It is not a recipe for building a sustainable and rewarding career or a life, because you will burn yourself out.
That's so true. I think I would venture to guess everyone on this call has seen or experienced themselves that fatigue. It is not sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
And that's where we can reach out to our peers, from a heart place and say, I'm worried about you. How are you doing? What can we take off your plate? Have you thought about where you want to go from here?
Yeah. And that's the question. You see, what binds these 4 different habits together? Reluctance to claim your achievements, expecting others to spontaneously notice and value, putting your job before your career, and the disease to please, is that they all demonstrate to some degree a lack of clear intentionality about your thinking about your job and career. Because once you're very clear about what it is you want to pursue and what it is you want to contribute, you will have a better sense of where to identify boundaries that you need to protect your ability to do that. And you'll be less invested in the idea of trying to please everybody, because you'll recognize it's not really the point is to please everybody. The point is to be able to make a specific contribution and do an effective job of that and make other people's lives better and easy by doing it.
Right. I know this is certainly not about me, but I do remember one time while freelancing, there was a editor who approached me to write something, and I was new in my freelance business. I didn't want to turn that extended hand away, right? But I thought to myself, if I say yes, I know I'm overextending. And so I told her, it's hard for me to say no, but for this assignment, I need to put my family first. I know this one will be too much. And her response was actually, wow, I wish I had been able to say that when I was your age, because I missed so many opportunities with my kids when they were young. And just the way she returned and told me that gave me confidence to keep putting those boundaries, being more intentional, knowing my tipping point. But I think that's something we all have to practice and keep practicing constantly.
Yeah.
I think we should see if anyone would be brave enough to join us for a couple of live questions this morning.
That would be great.
I haven't taken live questions this way before, so bear with us. But if you've got something you would like to come off mute and share, we do have time for some questions with Sally. This has been a really great conversation. Thank you for everything you've shared so far, Sally.
Sure. I think I heard a voice.
There's me, moderator Megan. I do have 2 questions from the chat. If we don't have anyone pop up, I'd love to read the questions from the
Great.
chat, but I do see Stacy. Do you have your hand up? You could.
Hi, good morning. Yes, this is Stacy. I had my hand up. Sally, thank you for this. It's been wonderful to listen to you. I work with women in a coaching and consulting environment as well, and I predominantly work with women with their internal self-talk. And so I'm curious if, with all your amazing work and all your work with different people, if you have any sort of tangible tips or tricks that you have and you offer to women specifically on how to sort of maybe tame some of those stories that can get really loud with the inner critic in their head.
Yeah, certainly. The first one is really give it a reality, give it a spin around the reality world by asking other people, and getting very direct about it. Again, you want to go to people you trust, but I would, when you have those negative stories, it's a really good thing to say to somebody, listen, I need to share with you the interpretation I'm giving what just happened in my mind, because I'm not sure if it's accurate, and I certainly am aware it is not serving me. So this is what happened, and this is where this is what my mind is telling me about it. What do you think? Does that accord with, your observation as well? So you want to get a reality check, because often these stories get started in our minds and they elaborate and we're going, well, this was just like the time when whatever, and it takes on a rhythm of its own and can be very, very destructive and undermining to us. And it's us doing it to ourselves. So that's a very important thing. It's also helpful often to say, would I be having this response if someone else did this? Would I talk to someone else like I'm talking to myself in my mind? And then once you do that, you can begin to recognize even patterns of real self-abuse. The other thing, and this is what I find most helpful, is to write an alternate script and then decide to believe in that, whether you have any evidence that it's true or not. I'll give you an example from my own experience. In 1990, I published my first big book on women's leadership. I found myself speaking at companies all over the world, doing all this kind of work up on stage. And it was new, it was unexpected. And what I found was that I'd have an audience and I would notice this person in the back of the room, this is pre-cell phone, who seemed distracted, who didn't seem to be listening, who seemed to have something else on her mind, was fidgeting, whatever it was, talking to her neighbor. And my mind would go to, oh, I'm boring. Do I need to ramp it up? What did I say that didn't, I would find myself thoroughly distracted by this negative story in my own mind. And what I learned to do was to just instantly rewrite the script and move on. See somebody who's distracted and go, she probably had a fight with her husband this morning and she's upset. Oh, maybe her kids are, one of her kids getting sick and that's what she's thinking about. So I'd tell myself another story and then move on and focus on somebody who looked very engaged. So those two actions, writing quickly an alternate script, and, for all I know, she did think I was the most boring person in the world, but that wasn't the story I was going to choose to tell myself. I was going to choose to tell myself a different story and then quickly shifting my attention to something that would give me more positive input. That really just, I think, saved my whole speaking career, developing that trick. So that's another one you can do, is be very conscious and aware about, no, okay, I'm going to write a different script here. And choose to believe that script and move on.
That's excellent advice. Any other questions?
Okay, Megan, you had some
Yeah.
from the chat.
Yep, happy to read one. We just received an anonymous question. So this woman asks, I know that I am talented and I have the skills to go to the next level, but I worry that I will do great, or I worry that I will not do great, as I have been a leading performer in every one of my jobs so far.
Yeah, that is a very common way of thinking that can keep you stuck. So again, I think an alternate script is kind of helpful here. Since I've been such a good performer in the different positions I've had, I am convinced I could be a good performer in this next one, because the script kind of doesn't make sense. The script is, I'm worried about doing a good job because I've done such a good job in the past. So I would a little bit rewrite that script. But then I think you also want to test it in reality. Ask 4 or 5 people, I am really interested in this position. What do you think? Could you see me doing it? What might I need to learn? Who might I need to know? So taking it for that test run in reality by asking other people what they think. And ask people who are your fans. Don't ask people who have exhibited skepticism. Identify your fan base a little bit there, and then try to get their responses and try to get information from them. So the more you can talk about it, in a not, in a casual way, not like I'm determined to get this job by, I mean, I think this is something men do. They mess themselves up often by setting these deadlines, by 28, I will be a this, by 32, I will be a that. And often they can't control it and then end up feeling not particularly bad, but, end up, it's not a good situation. I think women can be more realistic often in terms of their time framing, but it's really good to just bring other people into the process.
Annie,
Super
did
fan Annie.
question-
Yep.
Sorry, I have like my book here too, so I'm just like
Yay.
excited.
Thank you, Annie.
So Sally, I am definitely in the habit of like the perfection trap and the disease to please, and those were like, I was glued to those chapters. But even though I was trying to adopt the strategies that you suggested of prioritizing and delegating, part of me is kind of like, it's almost unnatural sometimes to say no, and I kind of didn't want to go cold turkey, and I did like bits and pieces here and there, but just wanted to ask if you had, tips of how to overcome that, I've been this way for 30 plus years, and, how do I suddenly just, even if I do have a clear vision, it feels, against a current, my internal current to say no. What do you suggest?
Well, there are two things. First of all, what can be helpful as a beginning step is not so much, focusing on saying no, because that's, the problem with yes and no is they are intrinsically either or. So that can be, a tough transition. What I find to be helpful is to practice stating what you need, rather than yes or no, but to practice stating what you need. In this situation, this would be helpful to me. What would be helpful for me in terms of some support for you or from you on this project we're working on would be this. So you just get in the habit of clearly, articulating what it is that you need. What was the second thing? Tell me what you said. I had another second inspiration about it, but it slipped my mind right now.
I suppose how to overcome like the natural instinct, your personal current that you've been building up.
Well, I think that there are two things there. I'm a big believer in, us being ourselves, but I think that there's so much encouragement about our authenticity that it can keep us stuck. When we practice something new, we're going to feel uncomfortable. And that uncomfortability can feel inauthentic. So I think that we want to go into this thinking, okay, I'm going to practice something new. This is going to feel a bit uncomfortable. I'm just going to stick with it because this is what I think is going to be helpful. And I am going to try to detach from the feeling of, ooh, this feels uncomfortable. Maybe I'm not being authentic to myself. So that's where growth really lies. Marshall, who I work with a lot, he's very Buddhist. And he always says, he would say right this minute, Annie, okay, raise your hand. My name is Annie. Repeat after me. My name is Annie.
My name is Annie.
And I was not born with a genetic defect. That requires me. That requires me to please people.
That requires me to please people.
And therefore, it is within my power to begin to address that.
And therefore, it is within my power to begin to address that.
Yeah. And I find that really helpful because we get in this thing, I'm the kind of person who, so it's a little bit of a trap for ourselves. I'm the kind of person who is not comfortable talking about, what I've done, whatever. And then we get stuck there. So we want to think I don't have some genetic programming that means that I have to do this, that, or the other. Maybe it's a message I got from my parents, whatever, but it's not within me that I cannot change this. It is simply going to require me feeling a bit uncomfortable. And that's why we want to have support. We're going to feel uncomfortable. So enlisting a couple other people to watch us or give us their feedback, it makes it over time less uncomfortable because we're telling them what we're doing. I'm practicing something new. I'm not that comfortable with it. Let me know how I'm doing.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I want to share one thing before we take one more question. Sally, I think this has been incredible, and I hope everyone on the call has taken something from it. If you have the opportunity to share one thing that you want to take away or that you want to think about, maybe it's your intention statement, maybe it's saying no to something, or maybe it's just speaking up and taking credit for your work. That would be amazing. But share that in the chat if you could. I want to tell you all that Sally is coming back. And so we will have 2 more opportunities yet in 2021 to learn more about these behaviors. And we're super thrilled for that. And then I would be remiss if I did not invite you one more time to come into the Building Brave community, where we have conversations with experts like Sally and with each other to help ourselves to, that's a great way to practice taking credit for what you're doing. You can share it with your girlfriends, your colleagues, your partners in there. So that is free to join, community.buildingbrave.org. We'd love to see you there. And then, because people are starting to chat on what they're going to do, I lost the question, but I believe it came from Mary Burke, our president and CEO at Building Brave. What does it look like, Sally, for someone who regularly practices taking credit for their work?
What does it look like? It looks like a woman modeling confidence and self-acceptance. And we don't see enough of that. We don't even see enough of that at senior leadership levels. And I'm not talking about, being all about me. I mean, a woman walking in and modeling confidence and self-acceptance. And that is one of the most powerful things we can do for the world, is to model that confidence. Let me finish with one little story. I'll tell you about it. What happens when we do that. I was doing a program out at Google, and one of the women came up to me and said, this is in the book, we'll talk about it next time, this little mantra of, oh, well, that's self-forgiveness when I mess something up. Mm-hmm. And she said, I love that. She said, and I'm a big ruminator. I'm always telling myself a negative story for everything I do. This was a young woman who was pretty high up at Google. She said, so I started putting little stickies all around my house and say, oh, well, oh, well. So I remind myself. So whenever anything happens, I go, oh, well, oh, well, oh, well. Yep. She said, the other day, my 3-year-old came in the kitchen carrying a big, too heavy, too full bowl of yogurt. She tripped. It spilled all over. And she looked right up into my eyes and she went, oh, well. Because she heard me say it so many times. She said, and I have never felt so good about anything. She said, I felt as if here I am raising the next generation of confident women who can accept themselves. I'm doing that with this 3-year-old. So this has enormous value to the other women we work with, and it has great value for men because it helps them get comfortable being with, working with, being in allyship, a confident and self-accepting woman.
That's beautiful and so inspiring when we can set that example and help shape the future. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I forgot to tell you in my excitement, we are also giving away several copies of Sally's book. What we are asking is you come over to the app and post your questions in there, and the questions that Sally has time to answer, I believe she can answer 8 of them. If your question is chosen, we will send you a copy of her book. So Thank you all for your time. We know you have really busy schedules, and so we want to honor your calendar and let you get back to your day. But thank you so much for being with us. And Sally, thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Oh, I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Great. We'll talk to everyone soon. Go enjoy your week and share with the world what you are doing.